Shalom, my Hebrews and Shebrews, oilfield disciple here for another beautiful, blessed day. But y'all, thinking about something and figured I'd lay it out here and see what y'all think. Uh, and so, hopefully, this message will bless you, encourage you, and even frustrate you. Go look this up for yourself. Don't just take my word for it. Especially don't take my word for it. Go look it up. What we're going to do is we're going to come out of Matthew 23, verse 24, um, where Jesus has laid into the Pharisees, hypocrites, and the scribes. 8 times he says, "Woe to you, Pharisees, scribes, hypocrites." 8 times in that chapter he makes that exact statement, followed by uh, the warning. And this one in Matthew 24, verse 23, it says, right after that, he talks about blind guides. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to get the camera flipped around here and let's get to talking about it. All right. So what is Jesus talking about when he says blind guides, you strain out a camel and swallow a gnat? Well, it's actually pretty simple. And I can look at it and I can see it's prevalent um, in those around me um, today, as far as whether it be YouTube or direct influences, the direct sphere of my influence on people, um, and how this can be prevalent. And I've even, I have to watch to make sure that it doesn't become prevalent in my life. So, what does that mean? What it's simply talking about in that is that, for a good example, today's modern culture of Christianity refuses to accept that God's Torah, the first 5 books, the law, has anything to do with Christianity today. We don't have to do that because it's been done away with. But yet then they'll take something that Paul said, and that becomes the gospel. That becomes, they deify Paul. They misunderstand what Paul's saying, and yet they're going to create a whole doctrine on it. Example, uh, there's a lot that, in my Sunday services, in the message that I bring, I have my wife pray me in after I have already prayed the assembly in. I allow my wife, under my headship, to pray for us. My wife is a prayer warrior. Why would I not? But many, many people have issue over that. Many people have taken issue over that, to the point where some no longer come to the assembly anymore, which is fine. I mean, it's your call. But here's where that statement that Jesus makes. You're going to get all worked up about my wife praying because Paul in 2 Timothy talks about women are to be silent in the church. They take that out of context. There's a few other scriptures there that it tells women that they are to be quiet. But if you read it all in context, and the one in 2 Timothy is really the only one that I can't figure out what Paul was actually meaning by that one, scripturally. So, for now, it's there. But that's only one verse versus all of these other things that God commands us to do. The 10 Commandments. We'll just suppose, fine, you don't want to go with the Torah. How about the 10 Commandments? What's wrong with the Sabbath? You refuse to assimilate to the Sabbath, but yet you're going to leave a church, or you're going to get mad and throw a fit over a woman praying in church. Not that she's preaching and being the headship of that church, but that she's praying. Um, all sorts of out of order. But yet in your own life, we don't follow the Torah, because those would directly affect you having to change. So those don't mean anything anymore. Why do we deify Paul? And what I mean by deifying Paul, we have taken Paul's writings and Paul's letters, and we have exalted that above even that what Jesus speaks. Did Jesus not command Mary Magdalene to go and tell the other disciples that he had risen? Jesus himself, See, we got this false understanding of what really church is. When Paul says be quiet, and for a woman to be silent in church, we automatically assume, oh, if you're in that church building, the woman's supposed to be quiet. Well, they didn't have church like we do today. They were the church. We are supposed to be the church regardless of the building. So I mean, if you took Paul literally at a woman's supposed to be quiet in church, if you took Paul literally there, that would mean really a woman would not be able to speak ever around other individuals who believe in Messiah. I mean, seriously, because they didn't meet in a church building. You feel me? And so, I'm not trying to turn this into that, but that's what straining at a camel or straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel is. We're going to take one issue, we're going to create a doctrine and make a big issue out of it, where there are tons of other things in our lives that God strictly commands us not to do. Don't eat pork, don't eat lobster. Um, you know, but yet here in this culture, we're fine eating bacon, we're fine eating shrimp, and lobster, because we like that. But yet I'm gonna hold on to this other aspect, or we'll take like homosexuality. I'm gonna throw a wall-eyed fit for someone being a homosexual, but yet I got no issue with dude down the street shagging up with different women or different guys all throughout the week and still coming to church. We got no issue with that. But homosexual, we do. Well, sexual sin, sexual sin. If you got a problem with one part of it, you should have a problem with all of it. But it depends on our own agenda, and whether we want to um, change our lives or not. Plain and simple. And so I see that over and over again. We're going to make an issue, and we're going to make a doctrine out of what Paul says, but it doesn't matter what Jesus or God says, because Paul came along, and because we don't understand what Paul necessarily says about a certain matter, we're going to raise him up above even what Jesus said. We're going to make excuses for why we don't have to do what Jesus says or what God says. But if Paul said it, that's it. End of the question. I don't care if I understand him right or not. That's the end of the debate. Paul said it. It's done. You feel me? I mean, that it really drives me nuts that that's our mentality. If Paul said it, it's over with. Well, Peter even said Paul is hard to understand. Paul is hard to understand. But you got to look at the whole thing about what Paul's doing and what he's saying. He would never do anything that would contradict God. And so if we see him doing something that God never says, or have him saying something that God never said, you know, now, woman is supposed to be submitted to a man. Plain and simple. That's the last thing God said about that subject. That's over. I don't believe a woman should have headship over a man, regardless. That's, that's scriptural. But a woman praying or prophesying, because that's what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, that no woman shall pray or prophesy without her head being covered. And it ain't talking about a hat. It's talking about her Lord, her manship, the one that's been given headship over her. Another story, another time, another video. But yet, one time in Timothy, it talks about a woman is to be quiet, and there we go. There's a doctrine. A woman is not supposed to speak in church. How do you get that? I don't it doesn't make any sense to me. that becomes a doctrine now because Paul said that, and you don't understand what he's saying, so we're just going to go with it this way. Well, Jesus says don't eat certain types of meat, but yet you blow that off. Jesus says to rest on the seventh day. You blow that off. Let's see, what else do we like to blow off? Sexual sin, let's blow that one off. Tons and tons of things, Keep the feast days. Don't keep holidays, but keep the feast days. Not blowing that off, you know. 'Cause Paul said something somewhere in Colossians, I think I remember, and, you feel me? That's straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel, Doesn't matter what God says, let's deify Paul. Let's deify Peter, whoever your hero is in the New Testament, minus Jesus. It gets frustrating, because you can go through and you can show 80 scriptures on what God says, but if Paul says it one time, that's it. That's where we're standing at. That's where we're putting our flag in the dirt. It kind of drives me nuts, it does. But anyway, my thoughts on Matthew 23, verse 24. Y'all have a blessed day. Be encouraged and be frustrated. Fulfill disciple, and I will catch you on the next ride.